Welcome to the Classroom Narratives Healing and Education podcast, the space where education meets resilience. I'm Dr. Joey Weisler, and in each episode, we dive deep into the personal stories of educators, students, leaders, and frontline advocates who are navigating the complexities within modern education. Whether you're just starting your teaching journey or are a seasoned professional looking for inspiration, we'll explore how to foster meaningful change, prevent burnout, and build trauma-informed communities within our schools. Now, let's take a seat at the front of the classroom as we get started. Welcome back to the Classroom Narratives podcast, our two-part conversation with Dr. Matthew Arau. In part one, we left off with Dr. Arau reminding us that the work of teaching begins from within, through our mindset, our inner peace, and the joy we create for ourselves. Here in part two, we're going to continue by looking outward, how those inner choices that we make can shape our classrooms, our leadership, and even entire school communities. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back to part two of our conversation with Dr. Matthew Arau, where we shift from the personal side of joy and mindset into the practices that keep those ideas alive. And Matthew shares how simple shifts like rearranging classrooms, reframing how we see leadership, and embracing his power of get can change the culture of schools. And together we'll explore how gratitude, enthusiasm, and treasuring ourselves can ripple outward into authentic leadership and stronger communities. I was illustrating an example of my own as to how I feel community works within my own classroom. And when it comes to community building, it should go beyond student-teacher partnerships, where it really needs to go into student-student partnerships, where they need to put their voices at the front. I always, starting from day one, they have to come in, sit in a circle. The circle is validating, they can see each other, and every day is a conversation. I join the circle just like they would. If somebody were to walk by our classroom and they would look in the window, they would have no idea who was actually leading it. Because in truth, no one really is leading it. We're all leaders in that classroom space. And every day is just all about putting voices at the center. And I think that's what keeps teaching fresh for me, and that hopefully any age groups, teachers can see that they can walk in and say, what can I learn from my students today or this term or this year? And I think that really makes it become this two-way relational street to help them grow.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. And I love that you mentioned circles because changing the setup of our classroom environments is magical. And when the teacher sits in the circle and takes the role of listener, and maybe every once in a while facilitating a question, but mostly just what I do, and it sounds like you might do the same kind of thing, but I'll start off with something I call communication circles, where you have an inner circle, outer circle, and each student has a partner, and we give a topic of discussion, and then the inner circle shifts to the left, and then there's a new partner, and somebody takes the role of the listener, somebody takes the role of the speaker, and then they switch roles. But then after we go through this experience, I have the students sit in a giant circle and then just share what this experience was like for them. And I'll say, like, hey, I know in school, a lot of the time the teacher will call on you, like you'll raise your hand and the teacher calls on you, but I want you to use your intuition today.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to call on anyone. And you just share, and sometimes I've had 50 students. We had 50 students just last week. 2 weeks ago, we had 150 students in a giant circle. Imagine that. And I'll share with them, I said, imagine that there's 100 of you just at a dinner table.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
not going to raise your hand. You're just going to share. And I said, if two people speak at the same time, that's okay. Just make a connection with that person. And one of you kind of just like senses who's going to go first. And then you can go after them. But just feel the room, feel the space, and share what's on your heart. And then I just step back, and then it's so organic. And the students now feel empowered to share their voice. And it changes the whole feeling, the whole culture of the space, and invites this curiosity and creativity. And students are no longer thinking, what can I say to impress the teacher? Or what is the teacher looking for? Instead, they discover their own voice, and they also discover that what they have to say matters.
absolutely. And they come to terms pretty quickly with, we're just looking for anything that helps them feel like they belong in the conversation, whatever that sounds like, whatever that looks like. And I told them that, I said, share something with me that makes you feel like you belong. in this conversation right now on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning,
Uh-huh.
whatever that may look like, just join it. And it makes me think about a student I spoke with last week for the podcast. She was saying, yeah, she was in one of my college classes just like that. She's on a different, I call them a Weissler alumni panel series coming up in November. She was like,
Oh,
she's like, yeah, I love that we sat in circles in your class because she said the term before you, she says, great class, lovely discussions. I spent 16 weeks staring at somebody's neck, and that did not engage me like it was when we sat in the circle.
that's a great reminder to all of us. Yeah, but you could just change the set of what, and it can be one giant circle. It could be students. I call it get in chamber groups. So as a
Mhm.
musician, I'll say, make chamber groups with the students around you and make like quintets, sextets, septets, make groups. And then so there'll be all these little circles in the classroom having conversation, and then those circles will share out. So circles are great.
Definitely. And it just makes us realize that in order for voices to elevate, it has to include the whole, not just parts, but the whole. Everybody in the room has to be involved in that process to move everyone forward towards finding their upbeat.
Absolutely.
And what would you say then is the difference? Because I'm thinking now of the different labels I've heard for the people who are in charge of the departments I work under. What would you say then is the difference between the leadership team, the administration, and the management?
And are you thinking of like school districts when you ask that question, or just in general?
Generally, but I've only seen it from the perspective of someone in academia.
Sure. So yeah, I guess I would speak from my experience at high school where I was a department chair and
Hmm.
the university where I'm also the department chair. And so the leadership team and that kind of structure, those are folks that are what we'll say on the front line. They're doing the work every day, and then they're coming together with other team leaders to help support each other and make decisions that will impact students. And it might be decisions about curriculum, it might also be decisions about student well-being, which matters so much. And then the administration is guiding the team leaders and all the teachers, if we're talking about the academic school system, right? And they might be enforcing policies, but they're also creating a vision for the school, hopefully, right? And the direction for where we headed, what are our important goals. And then the team that's overseeing those folks in your situation would probably be the superintendent, is what you're thinking, right? And the
Yes.
superintendent is, of course, also beholden to a board, which is really interesting. We think of the superintendent maybe as the pinnacle, but also it's actually the school board that hires and fires the superintendents. So the superintendent is really important, I think, though, in terms of being the vision for the school, but also being that connection to the community, because the school is ultimately connected to the community and it belongs to the community. The public school belongs to the community and the taxpayers. So everybody is part of the system, and hopefully we keep the focus on what matters the most, which is our students' academic growth and personal growth and well-being. And I know sometimes we get lost in the weeds in other areas, but that needs to be number one, is our students' well-being.
I love so much how you mentioned that because I mentioned it at some points on my podcast, but it's certainly not enough. And I brought it up in my first year freshman seminar once, like, what? We had the power more than you? Like, okay, well, don't spread that around. But yes, you kind of do. The way that the hierarchy of education works, as you would know, Matthew, is that we're the customer service representatives, if you will, for rather, we are the representatives for the students as the educators. But above us is the principal, who, in a narrow vision, we might think is the pinnacle, but above them is, like you said, the superintendent who is managed by the school board, who is voted in by the community, which are parents and even the students. So essentially, yes, the students are the ones who truly hold the keys to how the school really functions. And I love that because we don't emphasize that enough. So, in essence, when it comes to spreading that upbeat mindset, it also starts with the students as well, and making sure that we, as the role models, enable them to, like we said, continue flourishing those peer-to-peer connections. I was just speaking with someone recently who was like, wow, like that high school culture can be really, really clicky and sometimes even toxic. And she's like, you notice if you were to sit in the school faculty lounge why that can come to be, because you can see how teachers treat each other and it breeds the students that you see. And that was such a fascinating revelation. And it starts with us. It starts as the teachers role modeling how to treat the students and how the students can then treat each other to make that upbeat transparent throughout the whole community.
Mhm. Yeah, and that is the impact of leadership because truly a principal can cultivate a supportive and encouraging culture that connects the teachers to one another or creates disparate groups where they're in silos and you have the athletics over here and the sciences here and the arts are sequestered way over here.
Yeah.
Or we can find ways to support one another. And the same kind of thing in the classroom, we can allow the cliques to happen or we can really work to create a connected web of connections amongst the students by how we interact and how we help the students connect with one another. And I'm really glad that you brought that up because it is true that schools are often reflective of how the teachers act, how the teachers treat each other, and ultimately also how the leader of the school treats the teacher. So
Yes.
it's all connected. And I do share that, like, Upbeat, it does begin with the letter U, but the cultures we create in our classroom also begin with you, the
Hmm.
teacher. And I think that's really important to remember that, and just like the conductor chooses the upbeat when they inhale and they raise their hands, and they hear the music in their head before it's created, right? And I always share music's always created twice, first in the mind and then in reality on the
Yeah.
downbeat and by the musicians that then perform it. And if we think about this, if we take this analogy into life, our thoughts are the upbeats to our actions,
Yes.
and our attitude is our upbeat to any situation. And we choose our thoughts and our attitude. We choose our upbeat.
Absolutely.
And it's so empowering for the person to remember this that every day it's up to me to decide the upbeat that I'm going to approach the day. Because every day is a new opportunity. Yes, we may have had a really hard day the day before. Yes, we may have made mistakes, but today is a new day. And today I can choose differently. And I can decide when I arrive at school, I can set my intention. I can take some deep breaths when I'm in my car before I get out of the car and just let it go and say, you know what? I'm just going to be there to care for kids today. And we have choices. We can either say, like, oh, here we go again, another day. And we all know teachers like that. And what a drag, what a miserable way to live.
Yep.
Or we could change our mindset and be like, let's go.
Hmm.
This is a new day. I can't wait. I'm so excited to get to share this with my students. And we're going to create this together. I can't wait to see what my students are going to create and what they're going to share and what we're going to learn from each other today. Today is going to be a magical day. And just think about how that just feels differently. I'll share a mindset switch that I started doing about 5 or 6 years ago. And it's in the book, it's chapter 2. It's called The Power of Get.
Yes.
And I go into like the day it happened that where I created it and in my mind where it came to me. But I'll just share with the listeners it's a real simple switch of living life. It's changing our life from living in a four-letter word world to a three-letter word world. What are those worlds I speak of? I'll tell you. So many people live their lives thinking that everything that they're doing is a have to do. I have to get up. I have to turn the alarm off. I have to drive to work. I have to teach my classes. I have to go home. I have to pick up the kids. It just goes on and on and on. Just think about the energy that creates when we say I have to. Like the shoulders sag. We mentally like bring ourselves down with just the words we use. And words are powerful. And we know as a teacher, the words we use can absolutely transform the culture one way or another. But just think about this power when you change from realizing that your life isn't a series of have to do's, is actually truly a series of get to do's.
Hmm.
Everything changes. I get to wake up this morning. I get to have this breath. I get to have breakfast. I get to sip my coffee. I get to get in a car to drive to school or take public transportation. I get to go to work. I get to impact children. What's more important than that? When you start to realize that everything in your life is a get to, I get to do the dishes. And I call it the power of get. And I added meaning to those three letters just to take it a step further. And G is for gratitude. And I thought, how many times have I felt appreciation for somebody, but I kept it to myself? I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to share gratitude openly. And then E is for enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is a choice. I choose to live my life with enthusiasm. And T is for treasure. It's a decision to treasure the people in my life, but to also never forget what I consider the lost or the hidden treasure, which many of us often forget about us, especially us as teachers, right? We're givers. We
Yeah.
serve others and we know that we can give, 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 give. And sometimes we forget to replenish ourselves, right? Or we don't pause for that and we're expended. So we work so hard all day and we get home, we're absolutely exhausted. We feel like we don't have anything left to give, right? That feeling of overwhelm and that taste of burnout. And that's why treasure to me truly means to remember that you are a treasure, that you truly are a treasure, and to treat yourself as such, and that you have a beautiful light, a golden light within to shine brightly. And when you can remember that, shining your light brightly ends up shining a spotlight on others. And that's true leadership.
That's a
Shining,
mic drop.
yeah.
So, what was that moment like where you were able to switch that mindset?
Well, it was so powerful. It was literally happened on September 12th, 2020. I woke up that morning and I was looking forward to going for a swim in our pool that morning. And I got up early, but when I looked outside, it was dark, dreary, cold. It was about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was cold. And it was windy, but it was also raining that morning. It was raining really, really hard. And because of September 12th, after I had some tea or coffee, instead of going for a swim, I got out a notebook and I started journaling. And because of September 12th, I thought about the day before, which is September 11th, but I didn't journal about the day before. I journaled about 9/11. And on 9/11, I was a middle school band director. September 11th, 2001, I was a middle school band director in Loveland, Colorado. As I drove to school that day, I had no idea that my life was about to change. Our lives were about to change forever. And when I arrived at school, I went into the teacher's office to check my mailbox to see if I had any mail, and the principal was there, and he said, Matthew, I just heard the strangest thing on the radio. I heard somebody flew a plane into the towers in New York City, and that's all he knew. And unless you were in New York or nearby, a lot of people had no idea what was going on right away because news didn't travel the way it does now instantaneously. So I went into my band room and I turned the TV on. It was over the whiteboard and it went straight to the news. And I could see that it wasn't a little tiny plane that by accident flew into a skyscraper, that it was much worse than that. In fact, it was the most traumatic, most tragic thing I'd ever seen in my life. And about 10 minutes later, my first students started coming into the band room. Sixth graders, 11-year-old students. And we didn't get our instruments out that morning. We just set them down on the ground and we watched in silence. At the end of that first class, we saw the first tower crumble in flames. And then the second class of sixth graders came in and we didn't get our instruments out. We just watched in silence and watched the news happen in real time. And at the end of that second class, we saw the second tower crumble in flames. Then I had a planned period in lunch, followed by two seventh grade bands and two eighth grade bands. Well, the seventh graders started coming in, and one of the students, she saw the TV was on, and she said, can we turn the TV off? We've been watching the news in every class, and it's really hard. Can we get our instruments out? Can we play today? And I said, that's a great idea. So I turned the TV off. We got our instruments out. We started warming up, and we got out our band method book. And we were just at the beginning of this band method book because it was the beginning of the school year. It was the beginning of their second year of playing an instrument. And the piece that's in this book, it was number 6 in the book. It's titled America. And it sounds like this, just 3 or 6 measures. Da 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 da. And we played America over and over and over again. That's how we played the entire class. And when the eighth graders came in, we got our instruments out. for them too. And after we warmed up, we had a piece of music in their folder. It was an arrangement of a piece that was so appropriate for that day. It was Amazing Grace. We played Amazing Grace over and over and over and over again. On that day, my students and I came to understand the true superpower of music in a way that none of us had ever experienced before. And I think I fully understood what it's meant when it said, when words fail, music speaks. Because on that day, we had music to express how we felt in our hearts. And as I was reflecting on that day and journaling about it, I started making a to-do list for the day, like I often would do in the morning after journaling. And I always think about to-do lists as like this checklist, like it just got to get through the day, right? It's like survival. How many things can I check off? Like it really felt like I have to do. But on that morning, something in me switched. Something about being in the middle of a global pandemic and being much more introspective, but also reflecting on 9/11. And I just added one new word to my to-do list, and that word was get. And now my to-do list read something like this, like I get to email Sarah, I get to call Mark, I get to prepare to teach my classes, I get to study my music, and then I wrote, I get to dance in the rain. And I get to go for a swim. And that's what I did. I went outside in my swim shorts and it was freezing cold. And I just did like a brief, like 3-second little jig because I said I would before I dove into the pool. As I dove into the pool, I started thinking about all I get to do. I get to have this breath, I get to have this life. And as I was thinking about this word get, which is like really had me on fire, like I started thinking about another powerful 3-letter word, and that word is yet. And it made me think of Carol Dweck and her research in the areas of growth mindset and even her TED Talk on the power of yet. So I thought, well, why is yet so powerful? Well, yet is about hope. When a student says, oh, I can't do it, we can respond and say, no, you can't do it yet. See, yet offers help, says, I'm going to be there alongside you. I believe in you. I'm going to help you get there. We're going to work together. I believe in you. We're going to make it happen. See, yet is about hope. Yet is about the future. But why was I so jazzed about get? Because get is about the present moment.
Yes.
Get is about right now, which is the only moment in life that's ever guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, Joey and we get to be together for this magical moment, this conversation today.
Yes.
And it's a very special moment when you recognize that every moment is a get moment. I got out of the pool, and that's when I leapt out of the pool and I went inside. And I thought, what if I added meaning? And that's when G became gratitude, E became enthusiasm, T became treasure. And that's when I started sharing the power of get with people on webinars and podcasts and speaking engagements, and entered my book, Upbeat. And since then, the power of get has created this ripple effect across the United States and around the world. And there's school districts now that are adopting Upbeat wholesale for the entire school district, much in the same way that school districts have become a leader in me schools, adopting the 7 habits. They're now adopting principles and philosophy of Upbeat for their school and bringing in mindful practices and the philosophy of get and the idea that we can choose our upbeat in life. And so what began as just a journaling session and a pivot point in my own life to reflect that every moment is a get. It's been amazing to see how that's impacted people that have been burnt out, people that have been overwhelmed, people that have felt stuck, people that said, I've lost my drive. Of why am I doing this? Does it really matter? And when I've been able to share with people that yes, what you do matters, that actually what we do is a get. And then they've brought that into their classroom because they realized their students needed that too. And they would ask their students to share what they were grateful for and to share with one another and create get walls and gratitude walls. It started making a difference. And I've had parents share with me, it changed the way I parent, because I used to think about like even reading a bedtime story to my daughter was so exhausted, but I think like I have to put her to bed. And after learning the power of get, she realized, no, I get to. I get to read a bedtime story to my 5-year-old daughter because in a few short years, she's not going to want me to anymore.
Yeah.
And those stories have moved me so much. And yeah, so you asked, how did that come to me? That's how it came. And it's changed my life ever since.
Love it. And it's changing my life as well, just listening to it. So thank you so much. And it makes me think about the way that Upbeat is set up in terms of its formatting. We talk about Ignite, which starts with ourselves and our mindset. But I'm looking to see if you can distinguish for us the difference between working to inspire, for example, culture, and then you say lead, such as working to empower others by leading from within. So, what is that difference that you distinguish between working to inspire and lead others?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the book Upbeat is divided into three parts. So Ignite is about igniting our inner spark, right? And we do this through chapter one, choose our upbeat. Chapter two, the power of get. Chapter three is supercharge your morning. It's just filled with ideas and strategies to really jumpstart your day, whether you're a morning person or not. And then chapter four is sustain your upbeat all day, right? With little things we can do in setting intention, breathing techniques to really help us personally throughout the day. Then you roll into part two, which is titled Inspire. And this is about bringing what you've learned, how you've grown through part one into your classroom. So now your chapter five is creating an upbeat a mindset classroom. Chapter six is mindfulness in the classroom, right? So now we're bringing the mindful practices that we've integrated into our personal life. Now we're teaching them to our students to create a much more centered, grounded classroom that invites listening and creativity. And then chapter seven is creating an upbeat culture. And that's all about collaborating with our students to create a positive culture rather than culture top down. It's now from the grassroots. Together, we create this culture together. And so that's why part two is really focusing on bringing a lot of part one into part two. Now, part three takes it to the next level with lead, and it begins with upbeat leadership. And what is that? And upbeat leadership comes from this philosophy that there's four C's, and the four C's of upbeat leadership are character, competence, connection, and clarity. And so chapter nine is all focused on our character and how we can grow our character and how we can teach character and lift others up. And I'll share that even that the meaning of the word character is within the word itself. So this is a lot of fun. The word character, if we break it down, could be care actor.
Hmm.
Isn't that interesting? So
Yes.
when I saw that as a care actor, I thought, well, what if character actually means to act with care?
Yes. Love that.
Isn't that neat? And the book goes much deeper into the ideas of character. And then the next one is competence, because, of course, the character is the foundation of being a great leader, but we have to be able to lead by example. And so we want to grow our competence in whatever area we're leading. And the beautiful thing about character and competence is they can both be developed, they can both be grown. We're not born with a certain character, we're not born with a certain level of competence, but that's truly, competence is truly skills and abilities which can be grown. And then part three is connection, because in order to lead, we need to be able to connect with others. You can have a wonderful character, be highly competent, but if we can't really connect with others,
Yeah.
people aren't going to want to listen with us or collaborate or work alongside us, right? So, how can we communicate to bring people along with us, right? And then the fourth C is clarity, which is all about having a clear vision.
Yeah.
And I also am a big believer in not only having a clear vision ourselves, but working with our team or working with our students to create that vision together. And then it's about taking action. So everything about Upbeat, yes, begins with our mindset, and our thoughts are the upbeats to our actions. But remember, action is what it's all about. So I share Upbeat goals are actually unwavering positive belief energizes actionable thoughts. And if you write that out, you'll see that the first letter of each of those literally spells upbeat. Unwavering, positive belief energizes actionable thoughts. So it begins with that unwavering positive belief that will then energize taking action on those thoughts. And that's how we begin to transform our own lives and then be able to positively influence other people.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much for that. And so I think my last question to bring us to a close for today is to think about, in terms of what we spoke about in terms of positive mindset, if we could rebuild just one area from scratch in society in terms of our own professional development, i.e., centering on mindset, even emotional safety, perhaps even identity, what would that look like? And who should be in the room to help us find our own upbeats? And also, what would you say could also be on top of that? One major takeaway that our listeners can walk away from with today's conversation.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, it's kind of apropos that you ask about professional development because I love getting to lead professional development. What I like to share is that when we can find congruence in our life, when our values and priorities are in alignment with what we do, then we can have true joy and fulfillment. But when what we do feels incongruent with who we are, that's when it leads to burnout and dissatisfaction and unhappiness and overwhelm. And I think our goal is to discover strategies to elevate our mindset into the positivity realm, which has so many benefits. So when we focus on, rather than focus on what is wrong, focus on what you want to create. Yeah, I'll say that one more time. Rather than focus on what is wrong, focus on what you want to create. Now, notice how that feels in your body, right? It's not that there's not anything wrong with focusing on what is wrong. That's how we make the world better. We need to be able to identify problems. There's also nothing wrong with focusing on what is right. That's a great mental shift, right? To shift from what's wrong to right. We can always find something's going right. Okay. But when you focus on what you want to create, you put your mind in the solution finding realm. You start to see a realm of possibilities that your narrow focus didn't see before. And so when I lead professional development for teachers, I want to shatter their limiting beliefs because the longer we're in the teaching profession, it seems to me that we end up becoming more jaded.
Yes.
And so when we were younger, we think, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. And then something happens that we start to have these negative voices, or even from colleagues that start to and say, oh, no, I don't know about that, I don't know about that. The real dangerous word is a three-letter word called but.
Hmm.
It's B-U-T, but. I think we could do this year, but that'll never happen. We won't have the funding. We won't have the support. What I share with teachers, I say, what would you create if there were no limits? What if there was unlimited funding? What if your administration was fully supported? What if the community was fully backed? And what if your students were ready to go? What would you create at that point? I need to share that sometimes teachers haven't thought this way in years. So I want to free them up to think again with that kind of positive hope because it begins with a thought. And then when you start to think creatively, you start to find ways around those challenges and you will stop at nothing to achieve what you truly want to create when you get back in touch with your big dreams. But so many of us have lost the dreaming that we had when we were kids, when we thought anything was possible. I'll share with you, I do believe that anything is possible still. And that's because I focus on what I want to create. And that makes the difference. And so mindset is huge. We can choose to be a thermostat rather than a thermometer, right? And create our own weather, right? We don't need to go through life just accepting things the way they are. We truly can make that change. And I was thinking about your early career, about how there were teachers that were pretty down and they created a ripple effect around them. It was
Yeah.
contagious, right? It was
Yeah.
and I call it a ripple effect of negativity. But the opposite can be true. We can create a ripple effect of positivity. And that's the kind of classroom that I strive to create. It's also an authentic and real classroom where we acknowledge there are challenges and we feel all emotions and all are valid and that like be you, and life isn't perfect, right? And we're not always going to be at 100%. Be your best at your 60%, right? Be that you can be today. And so acknowledge our humanity and honor and celebrate our humanity, our shared humanity. But even though life is hard, we have a choice. We can either wallow in it or we can find a positive path forward. And I think that's where mindset matters so much. And then you asked about emotional regulation and how important that is. Well, it begins with the teacher. And students will model what they see. And unfortunately, a lot of students don't get to be around adults who regulate their emotions well. They might snap first or yell first as opposed to pause and breathe deeply. It's amazing what a deep breath can do to change how we feel. Our feelings are actually attached to our breathing. Scientists can measure how we breathe and tell us what we feel, right? Which is mind blowing. So you can actually intentionally change your breathing to begin to change your feeling. And that's super powerful. So it begins with teachers modeling that, but then, of course, sharing these strategies with students. There's solutions to help ourselves and to help our students, and students are craving this. They do really want to find a way to be centered and to lower the stress and overwhelm in their life. And I'll share breaths that can help them focus and actually perform at a higher level in exams, but also just center themselves. I call it the focus breath. It's in your nose for 4 counts and out your nose for 4 counts. And you just do that repeatedly, but with a real focus on your breath, and it changes everything. And then the last thing I think you mentioned was the role of identity. And I think how we feel about ourselves, how we see ourselves in the world matters so much. It goes back to what you're sharing with me about a teacher who felt that in what I'm doing, does it make a difference? Does it really matter? And when that becomes part of your identity, that I don't matter, that can be really, really challenging. And I think it's really important to remember that you matter. You matter because you're here and you make a difference. You make a difference by being you, not by being somebody else, but by being you. There's only one you. Shine your light brightly. And so I think that it's important to remember who we were yesterday does not predetermine who we are today or who we can become tomorrow. You know, every day is a chance to choose the best version of ourselves. And I think it's important for us to let our students know that too, because our students are so hard on themselves. They are so hard on themselves. The research says that on average, this is all human beings, 80% of our self-talk is negative. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And we can help our students learn to treat themselves like they are their own best friend. And we can help teachers learn to treat themselves that way too. And the only person we can ever change in this world is ourselves. And so that's why it's so important to begin with you.
Thank you so much for that. And one more question, Matthew. Where can we go to learn more about your work and the trainings and outreach that you're a part of?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, I'd love to stay connected with folks and get connected. And I encourage you to go to powerofget.com. And you listen to the Power of Get story today. And when you go to powerofget.com, you will be able to have free access to the Get Leadership Quiz, which has been developed to help elevate everyone's leadership style and ability. There's only 4 questions, and the responses will be tailored to you. And there's 3 different leadership types based on Get. And I'm really excited for you to discover yours. Are you a grower, an energizer, or a trailblazer? And that's going to allow us to stay connected. So I encourage you to go to powerofget.com. If you only do one thing, go there. If you're interested in checking out my books, I've written the first book, which is Upbeat Mindset, Mindfulness, and Leadership in Music Education and Beyond. And even if you're not a music educator, folks from all walks of life have read this book and they've shared that it's been life-changing. We also have the Upbeat Daily Journal, Personal Reflections for Inspiration and Transformation. And this book is for everyone. It's not written for music teachers. Same thing with all the other Upbeat products since the original book. So the third option is the Upbeat Daily Planner, the ultimate organizer for your get-to-dos. And lastly, the Upbeat Leadership Workbook, the definitive guide to developing leaders from the inside out. And you can get those first 3 books on Amazon, but you can get all 4 of them at the following site, giamusic.com/upbeat. And if you go to that site, you can even get bundle pricing, which is really cool to get discounts. And if you would like to check out my website, it's upbeatglobal.com. And if you're interested in really going deep and moving from the feelings of overwhelm and burnout and feeling stuck and moving into the realm of feeling re-energized and in alignment with your purpose, I invite you to consider joining the Upbeat Leadership Academy membership group. And you can find out more at offer.powerofget.com. And then lastly, I just want to share that I am on all the social media. Would love for you to follow me on Facebook at Matthew Arau. I also have a group I'd like you to join. So it's a Facebook group to join. It's called Upbeat Leaders. And there's thousands of teachers and folks outside of education that are part of this. And it's a very uplifting, authentic group and real and vulnerable. So just a beautiful space, a safe space for all of us to be energized. And so LinkedIn and Instagram, Facebook. So everywhere you can think of, you can find me. My email is matthew@upbeatglobal.com. And I'd love to have a conversation.
Perfect. Well, that was a wonderful conversation. Thank you again to Dr. Matthew Arau, who invites us to see classrooms as ensembles and educators as conductors of culture who get to lead with gratitude, clarity, and belief, and allowing transformation to truly follow. And thank you for showing us also how mindset, mindfulness, and emotional intelligence can turn any educational space into a place of both harmony and inspiration. And Dr. Arau's core message is that as an educator, what we do, how we do it, and why we do it truly matters to both the heart of our students as well as the system as a whole. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Joey.
Thank you for joining us on the Classroom Narratives Healing in Education podcast. If today's episode inspired you or made you think differently, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment or review wherever you listen to podcasts and stay connected with us on the @Classroom Narratives podcast over Instagram and Facebook. Remember, together we can transform our scars into stars in education, one conversation at a time.